Good afternoon, Helen, Kara. Good to see you.
Hi.
We've got a couple of pretty tough topics coming up here, but I think we'll manage to get ourselves through it. Why don't you folks introduce yourselves? Helen.
Hi.
Who are you? Where are you? What do you do?
I'm in internet land.
Nice.
I am a Florida resident. I am an ambassador for Recovering from Religion. I am also a volunteer with the Atheist community of Austin. And I invade other people's podcasts to talk about stuff. So that is what I do. And Kara, what do you do?
So I also feel like I live on the internet. Helen and I volunteer together at Recovering from Religion. I am the online programming director for our weekly Monday podcast called RFRX, where we talk about issues similar to this, as well as other things that impact people who are recovering from or dealing with issues of doubt and non-belief related to religious practice. And other than that, I am trained as an anthropologist. So I like to talk about people and what the humans are up to.
Cool. Well, I'm Stephanie Helms, and I'm you're looking at the Portland Ship Channel in Portland, Maine right now, looking from Cape Elizabeth up towards Portland town. And it's 41 degrees, as you can possibly see. So a nice day here in Maine. Looking forward to doing a little bit of sailing. That's what I do in real life. I'm a professional sailor and sailmaker. That's what I do in real life. But in fake life, I just monkey about on the internet and try to, talk about various things, sailing among them. And also some tougher subjects, which we are going to try to tackle today, I guess.
So I hope it's okay if we have a lot of sailing and boat puns today. In that case,
no, we can work some in. We'll try that tack, okay?
I'll try not to go overboard.
All right.
Oh my goodness, here we go. We had it like I think it was like a year or two ago we were doing an RFRX episode, and it was all boat puns in the chat, and it just kept going.
Okay, we'll try not to overload it. I feel like I'm fortunate when speaking about state reproductive rights. Maine is a small state, really. It's only got 1.3 million people in the whole place, but it's fairly, I guess, small L libertarian in its views. It's a very tolerant population for the most part. I mean, there are obviously some clusters of folks who want to get into other people's business, but we pretty much leave each other alone and allow each other to make the choices we need to make for our own health, reproductive and otherwise. But I know you, Helen, are in a state with significant challenges at the moment, and we'll get around to a state that has made some choices about family planning and reproductive choices that are probably the most invasive yet, with more implications for humanity. Actually defining a child as being a blastocyst, that they're being equivalent. So maybe Helen, you'd like to sort of, how are things in FLA?
Oh yeah. Well, right now the abortion ban is up to 6 weeks. So, which is, I can tell you as someone that has been pregnant before, sometimes you don't know. I think I was with Andrew, I think I was 11 weeks, and with Kai, my oldest, I think I found out around the 7-8 week mark. So you don't really know. and and the issue is now the state has decided it knows better than the person that is pregnant and what is right for their family. Um, and they say is they're protecting family values, but their own version of family values, because being able to make decisions for yourself and for your family is a family value, because you do not exist in a bubble, and also there's been a lot of cuts to state affordable healthcare and access in my state. So that's another problem, because a lot of this is affecting, low income people more than it is, the older population that, don't have, they have money. They are not worried about their viability and what's going to happen if, they get pregnant, but they vote on it, and they don't understand the consequences of how this is going to affect us. And the bill went through because our state legislator are mostly Republicans, and they are siding on the end of, basically taking rights away from people. They did it with, they're doing the same thing with gender care. It is basically, you're going to fall into line and be the things that we tell you to be. And it does not matter your health. It's not your mental health, physical, emotional, does not matter. You're going to be locked into this sexual, gender conforming slavery, basically, in the state. Because it is, if you can make decisions for yourself about your own body, and what's right for you, then the state is basically forcing people into, traditional gender roles and controlling their reproductive rights. And it's disgusting. Like, one of my coworkers, has to get treatment for an ectopic pregnancy. Luckily, they're able to get that access, because some of the laws haven't been completely, put through into the state where people can get access for that, because basically you say, like, this person will die, and when this was going on, I kind of had the attitude when this was being presented, that when those of us that have been screaming from the rafters about this, like, they're going to take away reproductive rights, and people got lazy, especially people in my state. And they were basically like, the state legislator won't do that. That's a little extreme. And lo and behold, here we are. So it's a lot to deal with, and it's very, very scary. I mean, I've had a couple of kids, and I had my tube side after my son was born. I didn't want any more children. So this doesn't directly affect me, but it does at the same time. My cats are fucking around, and stop. So, Cara, please talk for a moment. I'm going to shut off my mic. There you go.
Let's go.
And I'm going to go let my cat out. I'll be right back.
That sounds perfect.
Sounds good. Yeah, so I am afraid I can't really lighten the mood very much from the Florida situation, as I live in Texas, which is similarly situated with the reproductive rights or lack thereof, as the case may be. And our state as well has been one that has a long and storied history of not just attempts to outright ban access to abortion, but some of the more sneaky measures where they will implement more and more and more and more laws and requirements and restrictions that make it so difficult to get an abortion that even though it may not have necessarily been banned across the board, it is in practice inaccessible to many people. And then, of course, most recently, with the whole slew of bans that came out after the Dobbs decision, Texas also had a what we would call, I guess, a trigger law in effect, which was basically they already had laws on the books banning abortion, which once Roe v. Wade was essentially struck down, those laws were able to take effect. And abortions are now banned after, I believe it's 6 weeks in Texas. Someone correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but I believe we're at 6 weeks at this point in time, which, as Helen rightly pointed out, is perhaps before many people would even realize that they were pregnant. And in addition to that, we do still have a lot of the problems where access, even within that very narrow window, is so limited by all of these other rules in place about the different restrictions on where it can be done, and insurance has to be purchased separately if it's going to be covered. And then, people trying to go to someplace like a Planned Parenthood clinic are accosted by protesters standing outside, hurling insults and threats and all sorts of things like that, that just make it, in my opinion, unduly arduous to even begin to attempt for many people. And of course, as we know, these kind of restrictions on abortion do exacerbate the existing inequities that we already see in terms of women, as well as people who are experiencing poverty, people who are in other marginalized groups, queer people, trans people, people who have low income, people who are Black, who are often the subject of all sorts of laws about their bodies and subject to all sorts of criminalization of daily life, and people who are having family structures that are different than the conservative norm of the nuclear family. All of these people are just having these risks sort of piled onto them now, and being further and further marginalized by these laws that prevent access to healthcare and try to force upon people a sort of normative gender expectation and family structure that is simply not the only option for people to engage in. So yes, it's quite bleak here as well, sadly.
It's quite remarkable, I think, that we're having these debates that we did think were sorted and settled uh, in 1972 and later. It does not make sense for a nation in the 21st century to be having debates that took up the better part of the 20th. And in so many respects, we're reliving and having to relitigate these things that we fought for hard in the last third of the 20th century to achieve.
Yeah.
As a person of a certain age, it really is hard to reconcile. Oh my God, we've got to do this again. And I think Helen said earlier, we forgot how hard it was to achieve some sort of equity and equality between the sexes in terms of making reproductive choices. I mean, it was the 60s when hormonal birth control was introduced, which created an atmosphere of gender equality and sexual freedom, giving women the opportunity to express their physicality in the same fashion as has always been taken for granted by men. And so it's really weird to be fighting these battles all over again, and I think that it is indicative of the persistence of people who take the other view, to take that Christian view of sexual morality and reproductive choice. They've been persistent and consistent, and right now the front lines in the war for human equality generally we're on them right now. We're having to fight those battles all over again in so many ways. And as you said, the injustice of these laws that are passed by, not physicians, they're sitting in legislatures, either lawyers and hardware store owners and all of these people making decisions for about people's bodies, people's bodily autonomy, seems to me to be the most intrusive form of taking away human freedom and choice and liberty.
Oh, it's so intrusive. Yes, absolutely. It's deciding how someone's body is going to be used by and for other people explicitly against their will, or despite whether or not they have consented to it. I can't think of anything that is more intrusive that we could have legislation about, and it's not an accident that it's affecting people who tend to be more marginalized and less represented in decision making. These decisions are being made by and large, not entirely, but by and large, by people who are not going to become pregnant. And I think to your point, Stephanie, we're hearing, like you said, we're re-legislating this again, relitigating an argument. And some of the same people that are players in it now are the same ones that were opposed to it 40, 50, 60 years ago. We've got some of these same arguments being trotted right back out. But I wonder, Stephanie, if you have any thoughts on how it's different this time, given that a lot of people who are currently of reproductive age and could potentially become pregnant were born during a time and have grown up during a time when they were in some ways protected from what we're now experiencing. They grew up in an age where birth control has been widely available, where there was an expectation that they would be able to decide when and whether they might become pregnant. And do you think that perhaps people have forgotten what it was like before that was widely available, and that may be impacting the amount of pushback that we're hearing now that those arguments are coming back up again?
I do think that the if you hadn't lived through those times, you might and had lived through in a time where not just safe abortion, a safe medical procedure was available to you. I think people are not aware. We're not necessarily aware of the consequences of making it illegal. I recall, in high school, I grew up in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts at the time, abortion was illegal. It was legal in New York. And when I was in high school, where's Becky today? Oh, she's gone to New York. Everybody knew what that was. But the thing is, of course, there were practitioners, but they weren't safe necessarily. You had no idea, and the availability is it's like you could make abortion illegal in the United States all across the board, which is actually something they want to do. And the people that are passing that law are going to fly their wives to France.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah,
it's
that's
not
the way it always is.
the
Freedom for
people,
me, not for thee.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
and
then
when we get into the discussion of reproductive choice in Alabama, which is even more horrific, I found out today, Nick Fuentes is an IVF baby.
Huh. That's interesting.
I love the irony.
But he's loyal to the bit. There was this clip of him saying, well, let's talk about Alabama and what happened in Alabama, and of course it's evil and terrible and immoral and the Catholic Church hates it and blah 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 blah. But as an IVF, I'm going to set that aside, and you know, even with a procedure that he wouldn't be here if it weren't for the fact that this was available as a choice for his parents. And he's he is that person you were just speaking of. Like, did you think about the consequences of any of this? I don't think you did. And now it's becoming clearer and clearer. The person in Texas whose pregnancy was putting her at risk, and the fetus was deceased, who had to flee the state to save her own life. It's like these stories are gonna be in the news more frequently than not.
Oh,
The question is,
100%.
what will we do about it?
Yeah, and I think the issue also too is that when we, like, you know, a 10-year-old, you know, being forced to give birth, you know, from her, you know, from a rapist baby, like from a rape, you know, it's these things, you know, didn't think that passing abortion, you know, anti-choice laws, they just thought, like, you know, of adult women, you know, people that were viable to give birth, and didn't consider the long-term consequences of everything. Because guess what? They're short-sighted. You know, they're like, well, this is what I want right now. But they don't know that they're not, you know, politically educated. They're not, medically educated. They're not gender educated. They're just like, well, you know, this, you know, I think babies are cute and we should protect life, and, you know, blah, 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 blah. And it just comes down to a very simple way of thinking. And also, if they're using the Bible, you're trying to apply Bronze Age ideas and beliefs to the 21st century. You know, you know, people were dying like before they were 30 back then. And, you know, having babies was like, okay, we have to reproduce because, you know, there wasn't a whole lot of viability back then. There is a completely different mindset that we don't have any relation to people that lived 2,000 years ago, you know, but people want to hold up a book as the thing that we should be doing. And no, because, like, there's plenty of things even 50 years ago we don't do anymore, you know, and we have advanced. 50 years ago, polio was everywhere, you know, and then vaccines became a thing. And people are 60 years ago, and people are able to take care of themselves. And Carrie in the chat said sorry, Jessica did. Crime rates will increase, but not for about 20 years, and then they'll blame other things. So in the book Freakonomics that I read, like, you know, maybe 15 years ago, when abortion was passed in in the early 70s, the result
72.
actually brought crime rates down. Because they were
Sure.
looking at the long-term effects. Because guess what? People had access to get rid of a pregnancy for whatever reason. And those people were not born to be born into poverty, to be born into, you know, high crime rate areas, to be born to a single mother, you know, to be born in these circumstances that would have caused more societal distress. And Jessica's got it right. Another 20 years, if this isn't stopped now, it's gonna be the opposite. We're gonna be back where we were, you know, in the late 60s and early 70s with, you know, social injustice and people, you know, complaining about the high crime rate. And they won't blame it on this. They'll blame it, as they always do, on the people, you know, especially, you know, if you are a marginalized group, they will blame you instead of the system that took away your access to make decisions for yourself and your family.
Well, that's exactly right. And speaking of crime, it is, as you said, the case that it's the marginalized people, the people with less social standing, the people with less legal protections, who are the ones who are at risk of becoming pregnant and having unwanted pregnancies. And study after study, um, has found that those people are at risk of domestic violence and homicide as well as a result of being forced to have or just having unwanted pregnancies that they're carrying to term. It's not just that the United States has the highest rate of maternal mortality in the developed world, which we absolutely do.
Mm-hmm.
But on top of that, one of the main causes of death for pregnant women and immediately postpartum and anybody who can become pregnant is homicide, often by a partner or some other, whether it's a spouse or a partner or someone else in the domestic sphere who is unhappy with the situation. And again, these laws that are often described as pro-life are not promoting the life of pregnant people at all. They're promoting and contributing to the deaths of countless pregnant people every year.
I think it's really important also in this context to point out that the maternal death rate and complications thereof is way higher among people of color than it is among those of us who have a melanin deficit of some nature or another. It's stark how the differences are, and that says a lot about the state of the healthcare system generally. And it's something we really need to keep in mind, because all of these things, all of these injustices tie together. They are intersectional, and it's not said enough. We need to be, I think, working together to realize the dangers that this situation now is has become critical. And I do think it is critical now, because if we drop the ball within the next 10 months, it's not going to get better. It's going to get far, far worse.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary. And, the thing is, I don't think that these very fringe, these very extreme views that we keep hearing from a lot of these laws that come up, or extreme groups that want to promote these total abortion bans and everything like that. I don't think that those reflect the opinions of the majority of people by any stretch of the imagination. Most people are in favor of access to abortion and other reproductive health services. This is something that we should be able to make our voices heard about and speak out against. And I think it's very important that people do that, so these fringe voices don't take over the conversation.
Well, while we have the opportunity to, while we still have the ability to change these legislatures, we probably should start doing it. And we have that opportunity this year. There need to be consequences for people who are making their bones by taking away people's freedom.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to your point about intersectionality, again, I think this is an area where all marginalized communities, whether you're being affected by the laws about reproductive health, whether you're being affected by laws that pertain to the institutionalization of race and racism, whether you're being affected by laws that have to do with gender expression and identity, I think it's really important that we think of each other as allies in a similar struggle, and think about the ways that these are all overlapping issues that impact people's personal freedoms and rights to exist as not a, straight, white, wealthy, property man, and not to make straight, white, wealthy men feel badly about themselves. There are many such people who are allies to this cause as well, and they are welcome. We need all
and
the
I
help
think
we can get.
that allyship is absolutely critical. I mean, we need it's an all hands on deck situation right now.
Yeah, we can't.
Exactly.
like I say, like, we can debate about philosophy and, certain ideas, but like when we're talking about human rights, when we're talking about, this intersectionality, because if it doesn't like for me, like it's not directly affecting me, but it's going to affect someone I love and care about. And also, just because like this one thing is the thing we're talking about, but it's going to lead to other rights being stripped away slowly by, it's a death of 1,000 cuts. And unless we stand up and do the things we have to do in the next 10 months, I guarantee, like, as you said, Stephanie, it's just going to get far, far worse.
It's written out in the Project 2025.
I know. That was a fun read. There. Oh my God. If you have not read this, audience, holy Moses. It is
They're
terrifying.
Not joking.
Yeah, they're not joking. This is their plan. They're blatant about it, that this is what they want. They're not shy. They've all come out of the woodwork saying, like, we want the nation to be a theocracy, and we want to take rights away from people. And if you're queer or a person of color or you're a woman, whatever it is, guess what? We're going to take away your shit. And you're going to have to fall in line and this is the way we want it. And it's terrible.
Yeah, and let's bear in mind that when you combine all those categories of people together whose rights are being taken away, that's most of us in one way or another.
Yeah.
It's a whole bunch of marginalized people put together that adds up to the majority of the population.
Including the 40% of the country that is voting in favor of these things, including them. They will know someone who that their families will be affected. Just the lack of choice about medical procedures is going to pinch someone. As I said, Nick Fuentes wouldn't be alive unless that technology had been available to his parents.
Yeah.
And yet he's signing on to the kind of thing that, that allowed him his first breath.
Yeah.
No, it's just, and the thing that, again, so we all, are pretty, universal that IVF treatments are amazing. It has helped a lot of people become parents that may have not been able to become parents. But what's, happening in fucking Alabama, again, you are now locked into reproductive and financial slavery because there's
no fucking in Alabama,
and there's no fucking don't fuck anymore, everybody.
Don't fuck in Alabama.
Shut it down. Masturbate.
I'm waiting for the court ruling that's gonna consider that murder next. It was all those sperm were
because every sperm is sacred.
All the gym socks are scared.
Aiding and abetting mass murder.
Oh goodness, and why? Like I just don't understand. Like, how is an embryo a person? And also, I want all those people that have stored embryos frozen in a clinic to go find out how many you got and start claiming child tax credits. Do it, because if they're a child. And they're protected under the law, then guess what? You get to tap into those benefits.
Well, this ties into this again. Of course, these things are all connected because they're all about conception and pregnancy and all of this. But the scary thing that the first thing I thought of when I read the news about that. The Alabama situation is, if a blastocyst is a child, then there are an awful lot of children being murdered on a monthly basis if the blastocyst cannot implant in the uterine wall, for whatever reason, the blastocyst goes away. And as a natural bodily function. So what is Alabama going to do about that? Well, one thing they can do is make sure that there is no impediment to the blastocyst implanting itself in the uterine wall, which means no more birth control, kids. I mean, that is a logical conclusion of this.
Yes.
Certainly one logical conclusion of this. And again, here's another fight. 1966, Griswold v. Connecticut made it possible for married couples, bear that in mind, married couples to use hormonal birth control, to use birth control of any sort, right? That artificial birth control, anything other than the rhythm method, blah, 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 which, whatever.
My mom had.
And it was I believe it was 1973 when that privilege was granted to all and sundry. So we're working our way back towards a theocratic understanding of the nature of human life that ain't good from a skeptic's point of view, because not even the Christian faith agrees within itself as to what that actually is. And
right.
and in the Jewish tradition, all of this is bullshit.
Yeah, this whole song and dance about, marriage being between one man and one woman, that is not a biblical belief. There are many versions of marriage and reproduction and relationships mentioned in the Bible that are far from that arrangement, that are blessed and condoned and encouraged by the God character in the Bible, and certainly across, human history and societies and places and times. There are many models of family and reproductive communities, that was a strange way to put that, reproductive practices in different communities that do not conform to this idea of one man and one woman being married and apparently being either forced to have children or or at least encouraged to. This is not the only way that human beings exist, and it's not only is it not the only option, it's not an option that works for everyone. So these narrow definitions that try and force people into these models are actively harming people that do not fit this model. And I think this whole situation with IVF is where this sort of narrative in some ways collides with itself, in that it's attacking a method that a lot of times married couples who are dealing with infertility issues use to try and start a family that is in this nuclear family model. But it's also a technology that allows people who fall outside of that model to have babies. And I think that is the area that is perhaps being attacked here, because with IVF, people who are not married, single mothers can have children, same-sex couples can have children, couples who are maybe a little bit older than normal or have an age gap, or relationships between more than two people can have children with IVF. And I think that in some ways it's an area where it is causing a little bit of anxiety and fear for the very traditional family folks. So I don't know.
I think that what also, because I keep thinking to myself, like, because the law says that these embryos have to be kept viable into in impunity, like on and on it goes. Like your grandchildren, your great grandchildren are going to have to pay for this. The state's not going to pay for it. And also, back to the murdering of embryos, we have children being murdered in the streets in the United States because we have gun laws. So I don't want to hear any of this like pro-life shit when we can't protect the children that are already here, and you're taking away things like school lunch programs. from children, children that can't get access to healthcare. And then you're basically saying that now that embryos are now people, okay, they are more important than the children that are actually alive right now. And I hate that, because a lot of these people won't vote for universal lunch programs at schools. They don't vote for universal healthcare. They don't vote for minimum universal workman's income, a minimal income that you can make. Like, they don't do this. They're not into the social programs that would actually, if we're going to get rid of abortion, and we're going to have to, now embryos are people, and people are going to be forced to give birth and raise kids, then those social programs need to come in and support that. But they don't want that because it's personal responsibility. And I'm like, yes, that's what reproductive rights are, personal responsibility. But you want to discount that because your Sky Daddy says that we have to discount it. And he doesn't even say that.
Well, it's the old George Carlin bit, it's like we care about the child until it's born,
right.
At which point you're on your own, go, just the society has nothing to do with making sure a child is safe, making sure a child is fed, making sure a child is housed, making sure a child is loved even. It's a peculiar, strange way. It's like, once I get my kid, it's going to be all hunky dory, and I don't want the government interfering. But it's just a failure, I think, of empathy. It's a failure of empathy. It's so tribal that it works. All of these things work for me, and it's a failure of empathy. Outside of that, doesn't matter, because this world is going to end, and we're just poor wayfaring strangers, and there's a brighter world we're going to. So why care about this one?
Which you would think they wouldn't want more, like, forcing people to give birth to children, because, like, if the world's going to end, why are we populating more? It just, like, it's fucking backwards. That's all it is. And I'm very, because it's not based on logic.
It's based on the Bible.
Yeah, well, and I thought that was an interesting point too, that Helen, you touched on a minute ago about the this idea that, well, if the embryos are going to be regarded as children or minors, or however they phrased it, that then maybe you would have to keep them frozen in these freezers in perpetuity, forever and ever. And
I was looking for, perpetuity.
Yes,
Thank you.
I knew. Our brains are like connected, so I knew that was the word. I had our one brain cell just for a moment.
I know, we share. We got. You got the time this time.
But yeah, it's an interesting question, because I mean, it would almost seem to imply that IVF just couldn't be done, because my understanding, and I am not, as familiar with IVF as apparently we all needed to be before this ruling came out. But
I didn't think I need to be educated on it, because I was like, well, I didn't think that this would become a thing. It didn't even cross my brain.
No, I didn't, because this is not. And I think that's a good indication that this redefining of the embryos as children is really out of left field, because it's something that nobody would have even thought was coming, because it's so outside of what we think of as a child. So I think it is a very bizarre redefining of personhood, but also it kind of sounds like, my understanding of IVF is that usually they end up with more embryos than they're going to use ultimately. Yes. Like, some of them don't implant, or they're not all needed, or sometimes they have some in case they need to try multiple times. But if we're going to say that those are all children now, essentially that means you can't do that anymore because then you, you're not going to use them all. So what are they going to live in a freezer for, millennia? I mean, it just that doesn't make sense. I don't know what the solution to that would even be if they were going to continue to do
and
this
and
process at all.
and here's the thing too, like what does it mean under the law? Because this is something they have to figure out. Like, let's say a facility that is housing these embryos loses power. There's a storm.
Right.
They lose power for days. And the generator can't keep up with the demand. What
Mhm.
happens to the owners of the embryos? What happens,
Mhm.
the people that run the clinic, that
Mhm.
is keeping these things? Like, this isn't just like we're going to keep them in a freezer. Like, there's 1,000 things that could happen where those embryos are not going to be part of living in impunity. It's like 20 years from now, again, global warming, forces everybody to, move to different parts of the United States. And like where I live, in 100 years is going to be underwater. Like, okay, then what happens? This is not just a right now thing. Like, you have to think long term, but these mofos don't. Because
you've already got
coming.
the contract signed with Aquaman, right? To take
Right,
over the house.
exactly. Thank you,
That's
Aquaman.
awesome. Thank you, Nadia, for that generous super chat. Really appreciate that. And I also wanted to point out, Nadia had made a really good point up earlier in the chat. There will probably be a huge brain drain when The Handmaid's Tale begins in earnest. Not that the Christo-fascists care. And yeah, because who the hell wants to come to this godforsaken place?
Mhm.
Or, the imaginary sky daddy, as Ellen likes to say, ruled by, we got 7 mountains. Let's go, what the hell? Anyway.
So they believe that forcing more births. Yeah. I don't understand this. I'm trying to make it make sense because my brain isn't there. Like, I'm just like, I think you're shooting yourself in the fucking foot because this is going to affect you people in your population as well. You're not free from this. It will affect you or someone you love. And then you'll be like, oh, I didn't know this was going to happen. I didn't know that was going to happen. And it's like, yeah, because your empathy centers were shut off. And you were in a position of privilege, and then something happens, and all of a sudden they're going to want to change the rules. It's like when a conservative finds out they have a queer family member, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh no, like you know what, we were kind of wrong about this, and I do think they should have rights. It's like, yeah, maybe you should have thought about that before.
Yeah. And it goes back again to what you were saying, or both of y'all have been saying about, sometimes, well, in most cases, the people who are making these decisions for people are in very privileged positions. The legislators, the people who are in these legislative bodies calling these shots are in a position to where they personally either are not going to be affected by the laws because they are not of biological capability to become pregnant, whether that's by age or any other reason, or because they're in a position to where they can make the rules not apply to them, whether it's because they're able to afford to pay to go someplace else, or can simply get away with flouting some of the rules that other people can't. And I think it's important to remember that sometimes they're pushing for ideologies that a lot of times fringe groups that are very fundamentalist in their beliefs don't mind taking some casualties to get their legislation done and to get their ideology moved forward. We have seen that fringe groups will do things that will cause them to take some damage or some harm along the way, and they're willing to take those hits. We saw this with some of the stuff around taking precautions around COVID-19 during the pandemic. There were people who were advocating for policies that they knew would result in death and injury to their supporters. apparently they didn't mind. We have had in my great state outright statements by some political figures who have basically said, well, members of our state don't mind dying in order for us to preserve our freedoms to, buy energy from wherever we want to, or not have to wear masks on airplanes and things like this. They don't care. They're willing to take those hits, and that's very, very dangerous for other people to let folks like that get away with pushing those agendas. So, yeah, sorry, that was kind of a downer.
Does it take the priority of the fire stories over a house that's on fire? That's, yeah, like, again, yes, like this type of idea, like we're talking about, again, what happens when shit hits the fan. What that's what we're talking about, and everybody is they're not thinking about this. They're just thinking about passing laws that restrict access to people to be able restrict access to healthcare and the ability for people to make decisions about their own property, because like embryos are somebody else's property. They're the property of the people that made the fucking embryos. So,
and that sort of leads to a bit of a thing, because when we're talking about A Handmaid's Tale, and when we're talking about that vision, we are talking about making uterus owners into chattel. And property, and which it was in under English common law, that was the case until the 20s. That didn't change. A man could sell his wife for cash.
Are we supposed to be progressing?
Weren't allowed to vote for some time.
We don't go back. We're supposed to be going forward.
Again, we are having these. We are literally having the arguments that we've had in this country for the past 2 centuries. I mean, there are people that are literally wishing to relitigate the fashion of slavery as a thing, and it's no joke. The Speaker of the House refused to comment on whether slavery was a good or bad thing. It's like, come on,
it's just
be
a very
concerned about
thing.
this.
Is slavery
somehow.
good? No, no.
Yeah.
Anyway, no. You don't even have to believe, that mofo doesn't have to believe it. All he has to say is no. But
yeah, basically, yeah. It's like, is slavery a good thing? Nope, bad thing. Don't like
bad
it.
Thing.
Don't like it. Shouldn't have done that. Shouldn't be doing that. It's immoral for people to own other people, and it's just not a good thing. But it's just bad. Yeah. All bad. Nothing good about it. And
there's no benefit.
It's pretty disturbing that we have to go back there again.
Right.
So, I don't know.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to call that kind of thing out and not let people get away with acting like, oh, that's a normal thing to say. Because I think, we have seen a lot of these kind of fringe views and voices kind of amplified by the fact that you can go online and hear and say just about anything and find someone else on there who's going to say, oh yeah, finally somebody else who agrees with me, and you're going to get in your little echo chamber and be talking about that now. And it normalizes some kinds of discourse that, prior to being able to find other people online that agree with you, you wouldn't have been able to say out loud. People would have pushed back and said, what in the world are you talking about? And that goes both ways. I mean, that can amplify voices that are very harmful, and it can also help people find communities that are safe for them to be in, people who are marginalized in the larger society. So, I don't want to say that it's a bad thing that people can go online and talk to other people like them and find others who share their views, but it makes it easy for dangerous ideas as well to start to sound normal to people. And I think it is really important that everyone who hears discourse about things that are harmful, about things like, oh, I think it would be cool if we owned other people and, had slavery, or I think it would be cool if we forced people to allow their bodies to be used as a baby incubator against their will, or any of these kinds of things. It's really important to stop people right then and say, you know what? No, that's not okay. And I'm not going to go along with that. And here's why that would be immoral and unethical. And it really is important that we call that out every time we hear it, in my opinion, if it's safe to do so.
That touches on, I think, somewhat touches on another subject, which is to say, the impulse to restrict access to knowledge, the impulse to restrict access to knowledge about the human reproductive system, about sex, about people's bodies. It's so important that children age appropriately understand that they do have bodily autonomy and where the borderlines are, because without that knowledge, they don't know when they're being abused. They don't know when things are happening to them that are inappropriate. And these are the very things that people want to take off library shelves and put somewhere else. And among other things, anything that teaches or shows that not everyone is just like them. Not everyone's family is just like theirs. These are also things that people want to be sure that age appropriately children don't have access to. That basically the notion that a dumb population or an uneducated population is one that is more godly is quite frightening. It is quite frightening, and that touches on the situation in Oklahoma, where the state superintendent of schools hired a bigot to be on the library board, and that bigot was hell-bent on making sure that LGBTQIA plus children were persecuted in school, were denied a safe haven in their classroom by going after a teacher who was so horribly harassed by their massive following, by this person's massive following, Chaya Raichik. That's who we're talking about here. But her massive TikTok following that they had to quit. And it was the same school district as a young 16-year-old trans boy was beat up in a bathroom by three older girls, and he was in that bathroom. Why? Because the state of Oklahoma mandated that he use the bathroom of the gender he was assigned at birth. So it's a catch-22 for certainly for that kid. And it's amazing that it's coming up on almost a month of this incident, and we still don't know exactly what happened through the whole thing. All we know is a 16-year-old child is dead, and the circumstances of his death had to do. Next Benedict is who I'm talking about. Say his name.
Yes,
the circumstances of his death certainly had a good deal to do with the condition of the creation of a social environment that put him at risk because of who he was.
Yeah. And let's remember that, pretty much anytime, every time you're hearing about a transgender person and an assault in a bathroom, they're the victim. of the assault. It doesn't go the other direction, despite the fear-mongering that we hear about so frequently. The people who are at risk are the trans people themselves who are getting assaulted and attacked, and in some cases killed, just because they're trying to go to the bathroom.
Right.
This is
And what's also this, well, it kind of breaks my heart because their mom was encouraging them to be themselves, that they, didn't have to conform to gender, that they should be, who they are, and is now facing, some guilt for that because you're like, I encourage this, but also as a parent, you want to keep your child safe. My oldest is non-binary. And when you have someone in your life that you love and is vulnerable, you have to decide, where, do I allow them to be themselves? What does that look like? And also there's a bunch of bigots walking around that might cause harm. And it takes a lot of bravery for parents and also the people that they love that are gender nonconforming to go out into the world and be who they are. And my heart goes out to the parent, their parents. It is heartbreaking. And what drives me crazy is and they're saying that the bathroom incident wasn't the cause of death. Even though they were beat up, went home, had a concussion, had injuries, went to sleep and never woke up.
Yeah. Now, why is that not the result of
because
the
it's
assault?
inconclusive. It's basically
Oh.
the state examiner said it's inconclusive, even though, if you follow the through line,
Yeah.
it could be, argued in court that there might have been other factors involved, which is fucked up.
Right. But for what happened, this person would be alive today, as far as we can tell.
Exactly.
It sounds like, yeah. That's just really sad and devastating, and I don't even know what to say about that. It's just so disheartening that this continues to occur. And
Over and over
these were
again.
people who are making their bigotry known through physical violence. And, let's go back again to what we were talking about earlier. When we identify beliefs that we disagree with, it is important that we have discourse and dialogue about them in the context of expanding access to knowledge and sharing knowledge and having empathy for other people and hearing from other people so that we are able to understand them, even though they may be different from us. There is no reason for us to be jumping to, this person lives in a way that is different from what I understand. Let's attack them. There is never a circumstance where that needs to be what we're going to. This is not an acceptable behavior, and this isn't just a thing that teenagers are doing. This is something that happens to adults. We're coming up on Trans Day of Remembrance, or wait, let me see. Did I get there? I always get the two mixed up. Which one is in the end of the year and the beginning of the year? But
end of November is Trans Day of Remembrance, and Trans Day of Visibility is coming up.
That's the one. Yes. And every year we have to kind of review again and look over, how many trans people were murdered this year, just for existing because they were walking around outside and someone identified them as being gender nonconforming or something, and they are murdered as a result of that. This is an ongoing problem, and the fact that people have somehow been able to make it seem like trans people are a threat is just mind-boggling to me, when it is completely the opposite of that. Okay.
Yeah,
rant over.
It's interesting. It's fascinating in a rather depressing way that legislation regarding reproductive choice and legislation regarding trans people, who, by the way, I just always have to say, it's 0.2% of the population. It's amazing that people are so concerned about there's this tiny little thing, but it just apparently makes everybody just sort of cross their legs and cramp up. But they're twinned.
Chaos. Things, Stephanie.
The pieces,
Things.
yeah. These pieces of legislation are so often twinned. I know that the first abortion bills in Texas in 2022, I think, were introduced. One of them was an abortion bill, and this very second one was introduced on like the first day of the legislative session was an anti-trans bill. Mm-hmm. And again, the results of that legislation, by the way, there's I think we're up to nearly 600 pieces of distinct legislation. Not all of them will pass, but in various states across the country addressing trans people. Again, 0.2% of the population, which apparently that's a big deal. But in Texas, you may recall, I think it was 2018, there was a young boy, a trans boy, who was made to wrestle girls, yes, even though he did not want to, and won the state championship in the girls division, and everybody and he became the poster child. It's not right for boys to be wrestling girls. Yeah, but he was a trans boy, and now in this right now, the same thing's going on. There's another child who doesn't want to be in wrestling in the girls division, but because of state law, he has to.
Mm-hmm. And it just, that always makes me chuckle. It's obviously very sad for the children who are forced to participate in sports that do not match their gender or are excluded from sports altogether. But it just kind of makes me chuckle when we have people getting so worried about, trans children in women's sports, which, of course, they've never cared about women's sports before. But
right.
all of a sudden they're so worried.
We can do a show on that sometime. But
yeah, we're going to ruin
now is not the time.
I have never cared about women's sports because I don't care about any sort of sports ball at all. But when I hear rhetoric, and I'm like, you don't know, it's women, people, non-conforming and trans people have been a part of sports for decades. And because guess what? They have people that are epidemiologists and do sports medicine and, follow up regulation guidelines that are already in place. But because, now you're aware that trans people exist and are competing in sports, now we're ruining,
and it's only ruining, remember, Helen, it's only ruining women's sports.
Right,
men's
because
sports
of sexism. Yeah, that was my next point. Yeah, because and then like cis women who are bigots will now start going, go on PragerU and start talking about how, they lost, a race against a trans person is because, and start doing this rhetoric when really it's like, no, it's like, it's a sport. You didn't win. Stop being butthurt, because would you be doing the same thing if you lost against someone that was AFAB? No. Because you suck.
I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of talking about the nature of sport and how various federations, world federations, and the IOC and all of that actually how it all works. Like from an inside perspective. It's really quite fascinating, and I personally have been involved in my sport at the national level and at the World Federation level tangentially as a result of being active in the national governing body, the NGB. That's what it's called in the world of sailing. Which is an Olympic sport, so it falls under the declarations of the IOC. It's a long, hard story, but people don't know. People don't know that. They all have an opinion. They all have an opinion about it, and therefore it is something that makes the news. And it has just quite briefly. Participation in the Olympics had been allowed from 2000 2002, when the IOC and World Athletics imposed a testosterone limit on competition in the women's division. From 2002 to 2024, or rather 2022, no, 2004 to 2022, the last Olympic Games, the 2020, the Tokyo Olympics, only one trans person and I should include non-binary people, because there was a non-binary person assigned female at birth who competed on the Canadian gold medal team in Tokyo in football, soccer. But a trans person who had undergone a medical transition, which was required under the IOC regulations, only one competed, and she didn't even qualify for competition at the games. So some of these things, it's just, look at scoreboard. It's just not a problem, but it is a problem because it's been made into one by people.
It's a nothing burger.
Very, very concerned, deeply concerned about making sure that trans people are excluded from that particular arena of social participation,
and as many others as they possibly can, because it's sports, it's bathrooms, it's healthcare, it's schools, it's kind of like we were talking about earlier with chipping away at people's access to reproductive health. It's chipping away at people's access to public life, just one piece at a time. We're going to take away this, and then we're going to take away this, and then we're going to take away this, and then pretty soon you can't leave your house because you're afraid someone is going to attack you, which is a real threat that people experience. And it's not benign. The problem doesn't exist. To Stephanie's point, this is not a real problem. Trans people participating in sports is not hurting anyone, but all of these anti-trans laws are hurting all trans people and their ability to exist in public safely.
Right. And I get very frustrated, because sexism drives me nuts. And so I'm always yelling about it, because this isn't protecting any woman, trans or cis. It is not protecting you. What it is doing is saying that we need you to conform and be this type of person. And because, your genitals make up your personality and your identity, everybody didn't know that, did you? They want to force people into boxes, and they want that, Bible believing bullshit to be the norm for every single person in this country. And it's very disturbing when you look at the wider attitude, because if we have people, government officials, school boards saying, God, Jesus, and they're bigots, then people listen to them that hold the same ideology, and they do actual harm to people because they feel emboldened, because the bigot got power. And they're pushing, and they say, like, okay, you know what? You can go beat up, a trans person in a bathroom. You can take away people's ability, access to healthcare. You can take away a woman's access to reproductive care, and on it goes, because this is a sexist attitude. Because cis white men and conservatives, want to push everybody back into the world that they know, and too much change is terrifying. But the genie's out of the bottle now. You're not going to be able to go back to the world the way you want it, because guess what? It's going to affect you as well. It always does. So
again, we're walking a very fine line right now, because if if these forces are able to expand their power in government, we will see these policies be enacted in nationwide in the United States, because that's what their manifesto basically is calling for. Policies against reproductive freedom, policies against trans and queer individuals. I mean, I did a whole piece on Sam Alito's expressed desire, writing in a concurrence of denial of certiorari to a woman who had sued the Missouri Department of Corrections for sex discrimination because she was a lesbian, and two of the potential jurors on her jury were questioned by her attorney. And the question her attorney asked is, do you belong to a religious denomination that teaches that homosexuality is a sin and evil? And these two said yes, and they were disqualified because they, it's like, well, do you think that gay people are going to hell? Yeah, we sure do. Okay, well, you're probably not in the best position to make a judgment over this gay person whose job was just, So that got to the Supreme Court. Sam Alito wrote in concurring. He said, well, I would have accepted the case if it hadn't been for matters of conflicts between state and federal law. And a process thing. But this raises the very issue that I wrote in my dissent in Obergefell, that Christians were going to be discriminated against in civic life. And so his position is that those two people who held that homosexuality was evil were discriminated against on the basis of their religious belief. And it was like 4 pages of Alito basically begging someone to bring a case to the court that they can use to overturn Obergefell.
Oh yeah. And that's just that's wild to me. It is hard for me to understand what the discrimination is supposed to have been in that example. Is the discrimination saying you're not allowed to discriminate against other people, so that's somehow experienced as discrimination? I'm baffled.
Deeply held religious belief should not be a matter of disqualification for sitting on a jury. Is basically the way is basically that outlook.
Yeah,
but
you can be disqualified from sitting on a jury for any belief that you have that's relevant to the case that's going to be tried.
Right.
Helen and I know someone that was disqualified from sitting on a jury because he was skeptical.
Yeah.
Really?
I was disqualified from a jury because they asked, do you think drugs should be legal? And I rose my hand. I got disqualified.
Yeah, that's not, I mean, that's not preventing your participation in public life. That's, first of all, the attorneys who are going through this jury selection process are using all sorts of metrics to try and figure out what composition of jury they want to have, that they want to argue their case to, that is free from people who, have certain beliefs that are going to bias them against the particulars of the case, or people who have certain kind of prior experiences in their job or their education. I mean, you're not being discriminated against. The decision is being made that you're not the appropriate person to sit on this jury for whatever reason, because we need people who are going to be able to hear the case without particular prior knowledge. it's not discriminating against you that you have prior knowledge. It just means you weren't the right choice for that jury. That's wild to me.
Yeah, it
Okay.
is pretty wild, but this is the shape of things to come. This is the state of this is the state of play right now, and it will only get worse if there is more opportunity to pull those threads in the direction that Sam Alito is begging for it to be pulled. And which is why it's rather scary. Right now, I don't think the courts are going to protect us. I don't think legislatures are going to protect us. I don't think that governors are going to protect us. The only people that are going to protect us are us.
Right.
And the only way that we can protect ourselves and the people we love and the people we cherish and the very freedoms that allow us to hold beliefs that are fundamentally skeptical of religious claims, and certainly skeptical of the appropriateness of religious claims having a claim on the way we are governed. The only thing that's going to help that is going to work is for us to make sure that we encourage people to make wise choices for the future.
And to speak up for your friends and loved ones.
And speaking of people that speak up for their friends and loved ones in support of this channel, I want to thank our patrons, Skeptic Haven, Eric Ozols, Ryan Dean Murphy, Dan D, Michael Weissman, Kathy Cotton, Cindy Plaza, Sonny Shell, Aaron Colson, Phil Calderon, Amanda McLeod, and Logan Fisher. And I also want to remind you there are lots of really good programs on this channel. I hope you will check them all out. Tuesdays, we have Secular Soapbox. Thursdays, The Sunny Spot. Saturday, The Global Atheists. And this show, Women Atheists Unload. So, after we've settled all the problems of the nation and
we fixed
the
it.
various locales.
One conversation is going to fix it, everybody.
Yeah. Oh, looks like we have a super chat. I can't see the super chat. Why is that? Start. Oh, we do. Oh, we have a super chat. We read Jessica's, and we have a super chat from Nadia Yvette Chambers. Thank you for your $10. Very much appreciated. The public life rhetoric is near impossible to interpret and downplays the rather clear criminal penalties of prison. Mass imprisonment of trans people is the clear entailment getting covered up. Sad to say, but yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Listen, I don't want to live in Gilead. That's all I'm going to say. I don't want to live there. I don't want to, because we are heading that way. If after November, if we don't do something, and everybody's got to get off. You can't sit on your laurels anymore. You have to get up and actually give a damn, because you can't trust. We know that the government is going to do what they do, and they want to hold on to power. They're not thinking about the 10-year-old girl that was raped and all had to go to another state to get an abortion so she couldn't have a rapist baby. They're not thinking about that. They should, but they don't. So
thanks again to Nadia Vet Chambers, who sends another super chat of $10. Very much appreciated, Nadia. Obergefell as the target is a failure of imagination. They're going to go for Lawrence, i.e. to make gay sex illegal, and opportunistically imprison lesbian and gay people. Yep. I
know people who have said out loud that is what they would like to return to or bring about. That is not a leap. That is a real thing, that there are people out there who want that to happen. So yeah, like Helen and Stephanie
There,
said, go
there
get out
was
there and make your voice heard.
there's a story.
Just read Project 2025. It's right in there in Project 2025.
Mm-hmm.
It's 900 pages, but it's in there.
There was
Just Google
a state legislator somewhere, I forget, it was Oklahoma, I think, but it might have been Texas, who basically held that view that his words were particularly ugly about his view about gay people generally. And it's, the quiet part out loud, we're beyond that. The quiet part is being screamed. A candidate for the governor for governor in Missouri was proudly and quote only an honorary member of the KKK, and this fellow's name is at the top of is listed first on the ballot. He's not particularly popular, but I guess the way they do the ballots in Missouri is they draw lots, and he gets top billing as
remember
as
when the
candidate for
KKK
governor.
was anonymous? That's why they wore the hoods, and and like it was like you may have known a member of your legislator that was involved, but nope, it was kind of like whispered, behind closed. It was like an open secret. Now the hoods are off, and they're just based. I'm an honorary member of the KKK. Like, you shouldn't be proud of that, man.
Yeah.
I don't think that's really an honor.
Cool.
Well, I remember when everybody was when the Republicans were going after Robert Byrd for his membership, his literal membership in the KKK when he was a young man in Tennessee, right? Was it Robert Byrd, Tennessee or Kentucky? I can't remember. Anyway, former Senate Majority Leader. Yeah. But but all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, well, maybe Robert Byrd's KKK membership would be an asset these days for somebody. It's like, Jesus Christ. I mean, Byrd spent his career basically saying, yeah, that was a big mistake. I shouldn't have done that. Anyway.
Yeah, so everybody, please get off your laurels for the next 10 months and, do some shit. Because nobody wants to live and die at Gilead. Nobody does.
And not the thing we want to do.
Yeah.
Nope. Go out and talk to people and listen to people and have empathy and don't be a jerk.
Yep.
The end.
Yep.
It's that simple.
Yeah, so where are we now? It's been an hour and a half. I think we're coming kind of to the close of this fine session. I want to thank everybody in the chat for coming. I want to thank Kat, our producer and co-producer with Wes Sturdivant, who produces these shows, and everybody here at Skeptic Haven. So I guess we'll wait for our producer. Otherwise, we're just going to sit here and riff for another 15, 20 minutes or something. I don't know.
Hope everybody has a great week. Give someone a compliment. Be nice to somebody this week.
Yeah.
You need.
I know you told your friend you're not okay. And tell me what's wrong and why you never said you felt that way. Guess you're trying to stay strong and fake a smile until I look away.